Thanks, Bernd and Florian. So for sure, the future is voice. It's really exciting to think about the ways in which voice will transform businesses, provide accessibility, and change customer experiences. We want to do this in a way that neither jeopardizes our privacy, but at the same time, makes our lives easier. Speaking of that, got all these things in my hands. Florian, or Claudio, what's next?
Up next is another session on voicification.
I should have guessed that. In our next session, we're going to hear from the innovation lead for Magenta Voice, Reghu Ram Thanumalayan, and Dr. Joan Palmiter Bajorek, who's the CEO of Women in Voice. They're going to have an interesting conversation about the benefits of using voice technology and also some of the challenges. We will also learn about the Telekom Voicification Suite that companies can use to create privacy-conscious, future-proof products and services with higher customer sat and the potential for upsell. After their discussion, there'll be a live Q&A for you to participate in. So again, get your questions ready. But right now, let's find out more about the benefits and limitations for users and businesses. Over to you.
My name is Reghu Thanumalayan, and I'm the innovation lead for Magenta Voice Program at Deutsche Telekom. I'm a big fan of science fiction, and one of my most favorite time travel classics is Back to the Future. And there is a scene in, I think, Back to the Future Part 2, where Marty McFly, walks into his home in Hill Valley and sort of goes in front of his large 100-inch flat TV. And I believe the year is 2015. And he goes in front and says, I want channels 18, 24, 63, and the weather. And the TV immediately responds with the channels Marty wished for with his voice. Now, imagine this was science fiction back in 1989 when the movie was released. But today, using your own voice to interact with devices and services has become a basic customer expectation. Telecom customers can expect delightful use cases, and many more like what Marty wished for with his voice, with Magenta voice-powered touchpoints like the TV remote control, mobile apps, as well as smart speakers. Joining me today to discuss the power of voice, the challenges we face as an industry, and an outlook into the future is Dr. Joan Palmiter Bajorek, who is the CEO of Women in Voice Network and the top 4 influencer in voice. Welcome, Joan. Happy to have you. Why don't you tell us a bit about your journey with voice?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So hi, everyone. My name is Joan. I'm calling in from Seattle. Most people know me for 2 things, and one is for my research in voice technology and AI, and the other is for being the CEO of Women in Voice. But really, I come to this field really loving languages and really thinking about how people communicate. I'm an ex-academic. I've got a master's and a PhD in this field and worked at lots of startups. But primarily, I'm known for one of my publications in Harvard Business Review that looks at data sets and kind of how this works with voice AI, as well as Women in Voice and kind of the international community that I've built in the last few years. So really excited to speak with you today about voice and the future.
Great credentials shown there. So, voice assistants have been around for more than a decade now with the launch of Siri in 2011. And we do see customers, consumers, using voice on a daily basis to interact with devices and products and services. But do you really think voice assistants have lived up to their hype?
Well, there is a lot of hype, and the short answer is not yet. Right? But when we do look at how interfaces are changing, we see this really clear parallel to mobile, right? Back in the day, it's hard to imagine a world without smartphones, but when mobile hit the scenes, right, we had these really clunky apps, people were in disbelief, is this really important? And then later, there was a flood of adoption and investment. And now today, we have a lot of companies even starting with a mobile-first approach. How we plan, how we design, really thinks about mobile first. And now today, we're thinking in a similar way, voice first, thinking in that way as devices change. We also have research that says 97% of users have tried using voice assistants on their smartphones. This is research from Voicebot.ai. So clearly, people are trying, people are testing and seeing if this could be a good fit for them.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when mobile first was a mantra for software developers. We're trying to bring user experiences on smartphones, and that clearly evolved into starting with voice only or voice first. But at Deutsche Telekom, we truly believe that the future is more multimodal, meaning a combination of voice and display and touch and gesture and gaze. I think the combination of this is what we believe truly creates delightful customer experiences. I mean, what do you think about multimodal experiences?
Absolutely. I believe multimodal is the future, leveraging different modalities and really an integrated approach where you might see visuals, you might use voice to ask for things, but it's seamless and it makes sense for the user context. But I think you're right. So many people have been trying different voice devices and testing these things, but we haven't seen full adoption. And I wonder, what is impeding that? What do you see as major challenges for this growth, this adoption of voice in our field?
That's a great question, John. And I believe, the lack of adoption and usage that primarily comes from two factors. One, despite all the technical advances of voice technology in the last decade, using a voice assistant today is still quite hard, right? I mean, imagine those situations where you ask your voice assistant to do something, or you ask a question and then you get back an answer, which is not exactly what you were looking for. And I believe this is an area where we still have to get better. And the second factor, I believe, is this whole discovery of what our voice assistant capable of. I mean, we are still very far away from contextually aware conversational AI assistants, and going towards that, and how we repeatedly educate our users on what a voice assistant can do for you. I think that will really go a long way in improving both the adoption as well as usage and engagement. And switching gears, Joan, I'm not sure if you remember those BlackBerry days. I mean, when BlackBerry used to rule the roast in enterprises, and then the iPhones came along, and we saw how consumer behavior was really driving enterprise adoption. So how do you see voice getting adopted by enterprises for business use cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love the comparison to the Blackberries. I remember early adopters like my uncle, playing in the corner with his Blackberry, and that used to be ubiquitous, required. Today, we barely remember Blackberries. But, in enterprise, I see really two main drivers. And as you mentioned, kind of discovery and thinking, what is a great use case? And the two main drivers that I see in enterprise, one is cutting down costs. Right, we've seen for many years this could be related to expensive call centers, and what is the return on investment, the ROI for shaving down time, for making things more efficient, better user experience, etc. And in one of my previous jobs, my job was really to calculate ROI calculations. If we try this out, if we cut down, friction by 15%, how many Teslas of money are we going to save you per quarter by taking these advances? And there's huge incentives with this, right? With these types of investments. The second driver I see for adoption and testing out is actually that your competitor is doing something, right? The carrot or the stick. You see your competitor rolling out something beautiful with conversational AI and voice, and you go, uh-oh, I need to really consider that. Or to be competitive in this landscape, we really need to be making advances in this. So often companies try to hire a team, silver bullet, to fix the problem, but acting out of fear rarely gets the best results. Copycatting someone else. So my advice to anyone listening to this talk, companies big and small, is to really define a specific use case that's common, that would be of great value to your customers. Try it out, integrate real user data, keep those internal data sets, multimodal CRMs, and demonstrate to customers and internal stakeholders what is the actual value of going down this path. What are different other use cases that make sense for us, and really understand the why behind making these choices and this investment.
Those are some really great insights there, John, and I agree on what you said with return on investment. I mean, getting into building voice technology and using them for solving business problems, I mean, that still needs a lot of investment today. And I think it was a great piece of advice to start small and iterate. And this is exactly what we did at Deutsche Telekom too. I mean, when we started building our own voice assistant, we were very clearly focused on creating the best voice experience for the telecom products and services. And we didn't really go after, we want to build a general purpose voice system. And, by doing that, we also learned how to build and operate a voice platform. And, this is what we currently call it as the Telekom Voicification Suite. This is a voice platform that powers both our voice assistant, the Magenta voice assistant for our consumers, as well as helping other companies like our friends from France, Orange Telecom, who built their voice assistant on top of our voice platform. So the whole Telekom Voicification Suite, we also adopted this start small, iterate, work with customers and partners, and of course, look at data, that's a really critical one, because I always believe that a voice assistant is never fully done, right? It's a continuous process, so you need to keep fine-tuning and, make sure that your performance and accuracy stays when it comes to the machine learning. So definitely, I think that's a great piece of advice there to, start small and iterate. Now, switching gears to a more current topic, let's talk a bit about COVID-19. And of course, the way we are doing this, digital recording, miles apart and not being together at the same place. I believe the whole world has to deal with this extraordinary situation in the last 1.5 years. And how do you see the impact of the pandemic on voice and in general, the conversational AI industry?
Absolutely. Well, COVID-19 surprised almost everyone, right? And led to radical changes in our lives, mostly overnight. This also really affected voice adoption because people were suddenly really conscious of, what are we touching? All right, I don't want to touch that door. I don't want to press the button. And so a lot of research has shown that people are really more conscious of this and open to trying voice in different places, especially in business contexts. Research from Adobe and Voicebot have shown that 86% of people are really conscious of touching things and voice technology in event spaces and businesses. And as you mentioned, when it comes to healthcare, we see even more dramatic changes. Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Healthcare system, I think it's seeing a lot of pressure, also from the society, because there's high expectations on one hand to really help people out there in the pandemic. And on the other hand, this is a sector that needs a lot of digitization and automation. What we started looking into is also how can we use the Telekom Voicification Suite to support the healthcare sector. So we started doing, exploring some of the use cases together with customers on healthcare documentation boards. How can we also schedule appointments, on doctor's office? And I believe there are, many more such use cases which are worth investigating. But as we were exploring this whole area of healthcare sector, there was something interesting that came up. This is a sector that employs more women than men. And for those of us in the voice industry, I think it's not a secret that, we have these inherent biases, on how much recognition is there for male versus female voices. And I believe that was the topic of your Harvard Business Review article, right? So voice recognition still has significant race and gender biases. And how do you look at that? What do you think we have to do to overcome some of these issues or challenges that we currently face?
Absolutely. And this is one of the questions I get at almost any dinner party pre-pandemic about my work, is really thinking about, this technology works for my husband, but it doesn't work for the wife, right? This is extremely common of people trying to use voice AI. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned, we know that a lot of our target users for this healthcare context are women. We want it to work really well for them. And I think knowing the demographics of your end user, really thinking about, does the tech and frankly, does the back end match what the user experience is going to be for the end consumer is really an important thing to think about. And I wish more companies thought about it, but it's really from the hardware and the software, and frankly, the data sets are some of the most important parts to really a balanced and a fair approach in a lot of these things. But another topic that often comes up at dinner parties as well is thinking about data privacy, right? Where is this data going? How does this affect enterprise and the way we think about builds on the business side? Do you think end consumers or companies have different expectations there? How do you all think about data privacy?
Yeah, this is a really critical topic. The recent EU Commission report on smart devices and voice assistant, I think it draws a lot of attention to the need for higher standards for data privacy and protection for voice assistants. I mean, for consumers and end users, privacy is basically a hygiene factor, right? I mean, they care more about it when something goes wrong. But when it comes to enterprises, it's quite critical, for them. Privacy, I mean, especially how they store and process their customers' data, that's core to how they've been doing business, right? I mean, it goes one towards, for example, it could be regulated, or it could also be the trust which people have on the brands themselves. And creating and selling, privacy-mindful products and services while providing a great customer experience, that's really hard. But for us at DT, we take data privacy and protection quite seriously. And this is also the reason why the Telekom Voicification Suite, we went for a privacy by design approach. So we have, privacy built into the core of how we process data, how we store data, how do we annotate data, how do we get consent. So it's all baked in right there. And this is something that we take really, really serious. And thanks for bringing up this topic on data privacy, because that's really close to my heart. So allow me to return the favor and bring up a topic that is close to your heart. So Joan, you're really well known for the impact that you have created on the international voice community. So can you tell us a bit about what inspired you to create the Women in Voice network?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for mentioning Women in Voice is a huge passion of mine. And the real genesis, my inspiration was as I was finishing my PhD and interviewing at different tech companies, going to awesome tech events like this one, I realized that there was way more we could do to support women in the voice and AI field. So as I was finishing my PhD, I started Women in Voice in 2018. And in a few short years, we have 21 chapters in 15 countries. So clearly there was interest and a lot of people ready to sign up and participate in this ecosystem, men and women alike. And our core pillars are to celebrate, amplify, connect, and provide professional opportunities. So we are today a certified 501c3 nonprofit here in the United States. And as I've gone through my career working at Nuance, working at agencies and startups, I've really seen across the board how people are really excited, frankly, to support everyone's careers. So it's really exciting that our work touches the world and lots of people's lives, but really we have this mission that we want lots of different people at the table creating the future of what voice and AI look like.
Absolutely. I actually think you're doing some fantastic job in making voice technology, more international and inclusive. And like we just spoke about, I think this is really the key for making all the machine learning, models that we work on within voice technology to overcome the biases that we see today. So really fantastic job. So all of that being said, where do you see the future of voice? I mean, where is this all heading towards?
Oh yeah, this is the how many billion-dollar question, right? Well, for anyone who recently looked at the Google I/O talks, they really have been doubling down in multimodal, and that's the future I see also. Multimodal is the idea that we leverage technology in different modes, right? Using different inputs and outputs and different data sets, so that when we're talking to an interaction, maybe we want to just ask a question and quickly hear the answer about the weather. Sometimes we might want to see the visuals. What does that salad look like compared to this other salad, right? Another example is really talking about if I ask an experience, but I really want to see the sofa in the room context. You mentioned also augmented reality, right? To see the sofa in the room might be one of the best user experiences for output. So really think about how we leverage different types of data. I'll make the joke that even though I'm a voice influencer, I really believe that the future is voice integrated with other modalities. Another example I also give related to expectation setting. What are users expecting from the tech looking forward? And I hear stories of kids literally talking to different devices, talking to screens, expecting that it'll respond, right? So as we have different generations that expect different things, we need to also think about how we can prepare the technology for the future.
Oh, that happens all the time at my home. So my kids use their voice all the time talking to their devices. And I think, even though it might seem odd, but really using your own voice to, interact with products and services, that's going to become a basic customer expectation. And it was great talking to you about the power of voice, the challenges that, we face today, and looks like a really positive future for multimodal experiences. And thank you for joining us today, Joan.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.